What's up, YouTube? It's the Action Figure Grader coming back to you with a video. And when there are high-end, very expensive collectibles, no matter what it is, scammers will find a way. And we're going to talk about a recent scam that has been covered at length, ad nauseum, by other YouTube channels, and I'll put a link in the video description to some of those videos. So I'm not a big breaking news guy, but I did want to kind of share some thoughts because a number of you have reached out about this latest scam related to CGC graded comics. I'll give you kind of a brief history as it relates to this newest scam, and we'll talk about the market and how it's reacting. CGC came out yesterday, December 28th, with a response on it and what that means for you if you collect comics and how you can kind of avoid some of these pitfalls that some other collectors have fallen into. And are there going to be buying opportunities going forward, given the kind of lack of trust or broken trust that some collectors now have for CGC comics. So really quickly, here's the basic story. There is a seller on eBay, Comic Selects. I'm not going to name his real name, but this seller had a bunch of really high-end comics over the last few months that were like various really expensive, very rare books. Here's an example of one. This is a newsstand edition of Marvel Superheroes Secret Wars number 8, but this is the Mark Jewelers edition. And if you guys know what Mark Jewelers are, obviously, these were on like army bases. People could collect, or could buy different jewelry for their loved ones back home. And they're very rare comics. And they're all in super high grade. And these were all going for big money in mid-December. And it's come out that this seller has apparently figured out a way to break open a CGC case, slide in a lower graded book, then send it back to CGC for reslabbing, reholdering in a new case. So they come back with brand new cases, fresh, freshly graded with these custom labels. And, based on some of the books or some of the videos I've watched, it sounds like the breakdown in CGC's kind of security protocols are for these custom labels that you see here. Most of these books that this seller had, these newsstand editions or Mark Jewelers or Canadian price variants, all kinds of really expensive books, they all had this custom label that you can get with CGC when you send in a book. They have the normal blue labels and they have these custom labels. So apparently he figured out a way to break open the case, slide in a lower graded copy that he picked up cheaper, and then get it regraded in a brand new holder and then resell them in auctions on eBay. And you can see some of the prices here: $21,000, $15,000, $12,700, $700, and it goes on for like Hulk 181s. And there are a number of videos, as I mentioned, that covered like what this seller did. He was taking qualified examples that were much less expensive, that were missing the value codes in like a Hulk 181. And sliding them in and getting the blue label that do not have the qualified designation on it. So he was making thousands and thousands of dollars, but he clearly got greedy because he was doing it for so many expensive books over the course of several months. And, 99 Newsstand, which is an Instagram as well as YouTuber, he kind of caught on as to what was going on, and they were able to track the original books down that he was buying. They all had the same kind of defects, and then sliding them into these cases, getting them reholdered by CGC. CGC was none the wiser, and then the rest is history. So that's the basic scam. I don't know all the details. That's kind of how I understand it. He was probably then also reholdering the original 9.8 graded books that he was buying to get the labels and things like that. And so he's kind of doubling up his money and making a pretty big profit doing this. So anyway, it was caught on. There's been a big to-do about it on YouTube and elsewhere, Instagram. And finally, they caught on as to what was going on. Now, one of the books that he had was one I was watching and one that I talked about in a market update. And that was this newsstand edition of Hulk 340. And I mentioned, and I don't know if you remember, but I mentioned that, hey, this was kind of a weird sale because before this auction even ended on Comic Link, this exact same book with this exact same label, exact same certification number was listed as coming soon in their December auction. And so I got really suspicious because this auction was still going, yet it also still appeared and eventually did get listed on Comic Link as well. Same certification number. And if you remember, I said in the video, stay away from this book. This is really, really questionable. I don't know what's going on with it. And not to mention, and I mentioned all of this in a video, that I thought that this book had some pretty obvious defects. And the great thing now about CGC is any book that gets graded now, you can go to CGC's website and check out in very high definition detail. So here it is, the book on the website. You can type in the certification number right here using their search, and it'll pop up with these photos of the book. So when the auction was going on eBay, I was like, ooh, I really want a newsstand edition of Hulk 340. That's a book I have been looking for, and I was prepared to pay a pretty penny for it. But before that auction ended, I was like, let's go check out the certification on this one. So I pulled it up, and here's the photos. And as I said, you can pull up really high-res photos of it. And you notice it all looks pretty decent on here until you get to the bottom of the book. There was a lot of wear, and you'll have to excuse me because the function doesn't work particularly great. But if you go to the bottom of this book, if I can get it to work, right here in the lower right-hand corner, there is a major defect going on. Look at that corner. Look at that right-hand corner of the book. And it's very, very troubling right here. Now, as bad as that corner is right there, the back of the book is what gave me real pause. I was even maybe willing to live with this defective corner. But I think this is a good example of a book where this scammer bought like a 9.4 or a 9.6 of a newsstand Hulk 340, slid it into a case, and said, hey, you guys forgot to label this as a newsstand. And so CGC got the direct edition label for one of these books. A direct edition costs about $1,000. A newsstand in a 9.8 goes for $3,500. A newsstand 9.4 or 9.6 goes for substantially less. So my guess is he was taking like a 9.4 or a 9.6 newsstand. He was taking the label for a direct edition 9.8, pulling that one out, getting the 9.8 of the direct, regraded and selling that off separately. He would slide in a 9.4 or a 9.6 newsstand into the 9.8 direct edition case and then get it reholdered by CGC. And CGC did not catch these defects. So as bad as that corner is, look at the back of the book. The back of the book is where it's really telling. So I was looking at it and I was like, there's no way this is a 9.8. Look at all of the defects on this top corner. It's like big crunches of the book are being ripped out of the edges there. And so the entire top of the book has got a very, very rough edge. This whole side of the book has very, very rough edges. And so I looked at it and I was like, there's no way this is a 9.8. Look at the bottom of the book. Look at the bottom of the spine there at the binder, if I can get it to pull up. And again, apologize for that, but look at that. Look how bad this corner is. So in my mind, when this was going at auction, I was like, there is no way this is a 9.8 grade newsstand. So I stayed away from it. And again, before the auction even ended, it was also appearing on Comic Link. The auction ended here, and then it also still ended on Comic Link 2 weeks later. So there's something going on that this scammer has figured out a way to send in a book for reholdering where they are not checking to make sure it's still a 9.8. Now, I want to also give you some experience of my own. I had a 9.8 of Ultimate Fallout 4, the second print, in a 9.8. It arrived damaged. The slab arrived damaged. I sent it off to get reholdered, and CGC said, I'm sorry, your 9.8 grade is not going to hold true. We can either send it back to you as ungraded, we can press it and then regrade it, or you can just take the lower grade, whatever you want to do. So it's not definite that when you send in a book to be reholdered in a new case by CGC that the grade will hold up. And that was the case for I've only done it maybe 2 or 3 times, and that was a book that came back a 9.4. So who knows whether it was the damage from shipping that cracked the slab, or whether it was CGC when they were taking the inner well with the book inside out that they bent the book or something. So it's never a definite. But I think what happened is this particular seller found out that when you do these custom labels, like you see right here with Wolverine, that they don't check it at all. They don't bother checking it at all. They just reholder it and move on. So he found some kind of weird glitch in CGC's quality control or in their security system that allowed him to slide in these 9.4s or 9.6s, which go for a fraction of a 9.8. You know, we talk about that all the time. A 9.6 sells for this, like Star Wars 1, for example. You can get a 9.1 sub $1,000, $800, right? A 9.6, a 9.8, it goes all the way up to like $3,500. So it's a huge premium to go from a 9.4 or a 9.6 to a 9.8. And that's what he was doing. He was taking advantage of that price multiple by sliding in these lower grade books and then reselling them as 9.8s. And he obviously was very successful with it, but he got greedy. You can see dating back to October, he was selling many thousands. I mean, we're talking many thousands of dollars in books that this guy was selling. And towards the end, he was getting pretty greedy, where he had all these 9.8s. I mean, who has a 9.8 Mark Jewelers ASM 252, an ASM, or excuse me, a Secret Wars 8 newsstand Mark Jewelers in a 9.8, a newsstand Mark Jewelers New Mutants 98 first Deadpool. He was also selling a 9.0 Hulk 181 first Wolverine that was clearly not a 9.0. So he got greedy. He got greedy and he got caught by the market, by the comic book community. So this went on for about a week or so. All the big blow up happened, and CGC finally yesterday came out with a response and said, we are now aware of an incident involving an individual, we'll come back to that, tampering with CGC comic holders. Based on our initial review, we believe that the incident affects a few hundred comic books. And then they go on to tout how they've been grading so many collectibles, and this is one bad apple. And, you know, they said that they've retained a leading private investigative service and outside counsel to conduct a comprehensive review of this incident, and they're going to try and hold this individual accountable in the court of law. So, you know, CGC has said, look, it's one individual, a couple hundred books. But given how easy it is to do this process, and there are YouTubers that have shown how easy it is to pull off this process, assuming that they're using the custom label reholder where they're not checking the book at all, it makes you question whether it's really just one individual. And you guys in the action figure world, in the Star Wars vintage action figure world, we're pretty familiar with scammers, right? The Toy Tony scandal, where he was taking unused parts for Palitoy card backs, German General Mills card backs, unused blisters, used figures, assembling them all together, and they were passing muster with AFA and UKG. So scammers are going to scam. That's what it is. But I think that you need to be very careful moving forward. I'm assuming that CGC is going to come out with what they consider their comprehensive list of the certification numbers that this seller was selling. And right now, those certification numbers still show up in the CGC database as legitimate. But they're going to have to remove those from the database, from the population report. They're going to have to announce, here's the list of items that were affected, and you know, they say they're going to make people whole as best they can, which they should. But clearly, it was a fault of CGC for allowing these things to slip through the cracks. But the question is, how are they going to compensate people? I know some people, some other collectors that have been potentially affected by this scammer. We're not sure yet, but you know, these are big, high-dollar books. $10, $15, $20, $25,000 books that this guy was able to pull off this scam on. So the first question is, how is CGC going to compensate them? Are they going to come out with what they view as the comprehensive list? But most importantly, are there other individuals who have been doing this exact same thing that have not been caught yet? So it's a pretty big deal, and will CGC figure out a way to make their cases less, more tamper resistant, maybe have the certification number etched into the inner well liner so people can't switch out these books as easily, and make sure that the reholdering process, they check the books to make sure that they're the same book. So it's a lot to take in. It's a lot to figure out whether they're going to do it. But there's probably, in my opinion, there's probably going to be some buying opportunities for some of these types of books that he was selling, because there's going to be some buyers that are somewhat apprehensive to be buying high-grade Hulk 181s, high-grade newsstand or newsstand New Mutants 98s, high-grade ASM 252 newsstands. So I think, me personally, how is it affecting my purchase habits? I'm certainly not going to be buying any books that I have any sort of question on. If I cannot look it up on CGC's website to have these high-res photos, so older grades, I've got to be very, very trustworthy of that seller. And how many of these books that this scammer has not resold are going to make their way to Comic Link, to Hakes, to Heritage, all of those other big auction houses? They could have inventory. And clearly, Comic Link already did, right? They had this exact same book that was on this scammer's account at auction on eBay. They had this exact same book in their last auction on Comic Link. So, again, I think I told you guys, I was like, stay away from that book that's on Comic Link, because I get a bad feeling about it. And I was right. This was all before this scam even came out. It just happened to be that it was this scammer's book. So you got to be really careful with any book right now that has this custom label. And I've got an example for you of it. So here we go. So this is a book that is in the new January 11th Comic Link auction. It's another Hulk 340. This time it's a direct edition, but it had the custom label on it. And I remember when this scam happened, or when this scam all blew up about a week ago, I was like, I better go check out that custom label Hulk 340 direct edition that I had my eye on in the January 11th upcoming Comic Link auction. And so I pulled the book up. It was a recently graded book, so we get high-res photos of it, and guess what? It's the exact same condition as that newsstand 340 that was in that scam. So it's very possible that this book that's coming up on January 11th belongs to that scammer, or is a result of that scammer. Let's take a look at the back of the book. So this book is coming up in the next Comic Link auction. This is a direct edition, not a newsstand. Now, in all fairness, Hulk 340 in a newsstand, it's known to have this feathering issue. But look how bad it is. Look how bad the feathering is on this direct edition. I own a direct edition of this book in a 9.8 grade. It looks nothing like this book. Absolutely nothing. Look how bad the feathering is all over the top and the left-hand side of the back of the book. It's all, you got bad feathering on there. Really bad feathering. So look at the bottom of the spine there. It's the same issue that was with that with that newsstand edition of 340 that this scammer was using. Look at this. This corner is missing a whole chunk. Look at this. He's missing a whole chunk of that corner. So in my mind, there's a very high likelihood that this January 11th book that's coming soon with the custom label again is from that same seller. It's from the same seller. So you got to be really careful with any book right now that's got the custom label that's labeled as a 9.8. Even the bottom of the front of the book has got some issues going on. So it's very, very possible that this book is another scammer book, and he's just picking a different avenue to sell it. It's a little more discreet by having a third party list these at auction versus listing them yourself on eBay. And I think, there's potential that he gets caught for fraud, for wire fraud, given that he took payment over PayPal, mail fraud. So, they could, in theory, get the FBI involved on this book. So, for this guy, for this seller and all the scams he's got. Look how soft that edge is on the front of the book. So, again, I think the front of the book, you could maybe make an argument that it's a 9.8. But after you get to the back of the book and all of this feathering, that's, again, this is not even sold yet. And I have no idea who owns this book. All right. It may not be, and it may not belong to this scammer, but it's very, very likely that it is, because it's got the custom label. It's very clearly, in my mind, not a 9.8, and it probably is from the same seller, if you had to ask me. So moving forward, I think there are going to be buying opportunities, but make sure that you stay away from any books that have this custom artwork labels, because that seems to be where the breakdown was at CGC, that because it maybe had a different department than the regular labels, and the people running that department was a lot smaller. The custom labels cost more money. So maybe there's a smaller group that weren't as well trained, or Could it be an inside job? Who knows? I don't know the answer to it, but I know that I'm staying away from anything with custom labels, and I'm making sure that any book that I buy has to have that's expensive. It's an expensive book. They're not going to be running this scam on $200 books. All right. They're running this scam on $1,000 and plus books, right? Because that's where the margin is between a 9.6 and a 9.8. It's big margins, profit margins for the scammers. So, I think that they're going to be buying opportunities because people are going to be really hesitant on some of these books. But do your homework. And remember, we talk about this all the time on my channel, right? Buy the action figure, buy the figure, not the grade. Buy the figure, not the grade. And the same thing is going to apply for CGC Comics, and it always has applied for me. It always has applied for me. Buy the comic, not the grade, because some of these books that are 9.8 grades, they have spine ticks, they have defects, they have they have Newton rings, they have just obvious defects that maybe the grader did not catch. And in this case, they have obvious defects that a scammer was using to change out the books. So you got to be careful. And, is CGC going to survive? Yes. I mean, they grade too many collectibles. And, it's unfortunate that CBCS has not taken off more, and that the price disparity between a CGC 9.8 and a CBCS 9.8 is so large. It's a shame, because I actually think that the CBCS cases, especially the new ones that they just came out with, are really nice. I had a buddy over who had a CBCS case, the brand new ones with the new labels and the new case style. The cases are much sturdier. I don't know how you could break into those cases. So CGC is definitely going to have to up their game in terms of their case quality to compete with CBCS. But even if they don't, let's say they try to sweep all this under the rug, they compensate the people that got screwed by this scammer, and they just go back to business as usual with maybe like a certification number on the inner well liner, and they don't change the outer case at all. I don't think it's going to affect their market share very much, unfortunately, because a lot of what CGC is resale value, right? And a lot of the comic book resellers, they're not going to use CBCS no matter what, because the price margins aren't, the value for a CBCS 9.8 does not compare to a CGC 9.8. It's a pretty significant drop in price, a pretty significant discount. And it's a shame, and it would take a wholesale movement of all collectors, the whole collector market, to move over to CBCS. And, during this whole fiasco that's been going on for the last week, where has CBCS been? Why have they not been pounding social media, pounding YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, saying, hey, by the way, our cases are much more tamper resistant, and we encourage you to give us a try? They should have been doing that all through the holidays, but they haven't. They've been radio silent for the most part. So they've really missed out on a good marketing opportunity, while CGC has yet another scandal. And there's going to be more scandals. There always are. Scammers will find another way to scam other people out of their money. It's just a fact of life. And it's going to continue in every collectible market. It's not just comics. It's not just the Toy Tony scandal with AFA and UKG certifying Toy Tonys. It's in coins. It's in everything, and anything and everything. They find a way to scam. But how CGC responds from here, and how they make whole some of these collectors that got really screwed by this guy, will tell the tale, I think, as to whether CGC maintains their market dominance or not. So anyway, I know that's a long video, and I hope I added something more, something else versus just rehashing what everyone else has talked about. And I think, quite honestly, the biggest thing is this book that's at auction next month. I'm going to release this video on January 6th. I'm making it on December 29th, but because of my release schedule, I'm going to release this video on the 6th of January. 5 short days later, this exact book is going to be coming up on Comic Link. And in my opinion, this is not a 9.8 grade, and it's very likely from this same seller. It's very likely. And, I don't know for sure, but if you own this book and you're watching this video and you have it up at Comic Link, leave a comment, because I'd like to know if it's not this scammer, because it does not look like a 9.8 to me. I'm sorry. It just does not. I've heard of featherings the feathering issue on the newsstand edition, but this is a direct edition. And I own a direct edition for this book in a 9.8 grade, and it looks nothing like this book. So I would put money on it that this book that's coming up on Comic Link is from the same seller. It's from the same seller that has caused all of these issues for CGC. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll be back soon.